I had a pain-free, unmedicated, supernatural birth, and I'm going to tell you all about it. I have been praying for a pain-free birth. I refuse. That's literally what I remember thinking in my head. Jesus died on the cross, which means he's broken every curse. And so that means the pain in childbirth doesn't have to be our portion. Hey guys, my name is Brenna, and I am so excited to be sharing with you today my supernatural, unmedicated, pain-free birth story. So I am a mom of one. I'm currently pregnant. I'm currently 20 weeks pregnant with our second son. And I had a wild birth story, and I'm so excited to share it with you. So I feel like I have to preface the whole birth story with basically what led up to my son's birth. My husband and I are originally from the state of Texas, and we felt called by the Lord to go to the state of Washington and join a church called The Pursuit. One of the last years we were there, obviously, I got pregnant with my son. I'm like 20 weeks pregnant with my son, but we feel called to plant a church in Texas. And so we pray about it and we feel like, oh my gosh, I believe this is from the Lord. And so we present it to our pastor. My son's due date was in March, middle March. So we were like, hey, let's stay here through April, be here through Easter, and then we would move to Texas and plant our church in Texas after that. At the time, we were being presented with a miracle building. And so our pastor in Washington told us, I believe you need to go as soon as possible. And as soon as possible means I was literally 34 weeks pregnant. And I think that's literally 2 weeks off from when you can fly. So we're getting everything ready. We've been remodeling the house we've been living in for almost 2 years. So we're living in a remodel. Our house literally looked like a crack house because we had so much stuff just everywhere. There was so much dust. I'm like super pregnant. It was a wild time. And so at about 36 weeks pregnant, which is 36. Yeah, maybe I was 36. Yeah, I think I was 36 weeks pregnant. And so I flew down, started getting things settled. I'm about to give birth essentially, and my birth center is going to give birth, and I obviously cannot give birth in it anymore because that's in Washington and I am now in Texas. And so I am literally calling every single birthing center that I know. I hear nothing from any of the birth centers. The only one that I heard back from a birth center, I went and toured, and they were not kind. The midwife who interviewed me did not look me in the eyes the entire time. It was not good. And come to find out that one of my friends had given birth there, and she had the most awful, horrific experience ever. I remember just feeling so defeated because I wasn't hearing anything back. I didn't know what was going to happen. The only resource that birth center that I didn't end up going with and didn't have a spot for me either gave me was they said that they have a midwife unit at a local hospital. And that just wasn't what I wanted to do. Lo and behold, I'm literally eating my shrimp lunch in my car. There's this place called Coco Shrimp. It's the best. Eating shrimp in my car. I'm like, what on earth is going to happen? Lord, you need to open a door. And I get a call. I don't even remember who this midwife is. I don't even remember emailing her, but she only does home births. She said she would love to take me, and that because I'm coming in so late that I actually get a discounted price. And so I'm literally like, well, I guess I'm going to give birth in my dad's living room. And so that was literally the plan. So it wasn't originally wanted to do a home birth. I wanted to do a birth center. But the thing about a home birth is that it's literally the same thing just at your house. And honestly, I am so thankful for the home birth because it's beautiful. It was intimate. It was special. It was cozy. And now I'm a home birth advocate, and so is my husband. My husband was nervous whenever I first told him we're switching to a home birth because he didn't know anyone that had given a home birth. We had a few friends who had, and they all had amazing stories. So I felt confident and I felt excited. Let me pull up. I have notes in my phone from when I first started going into labor. So we moved down. I literally have written down 37-week check-in. We're in Texas. You're going to be born a Texan, Silas, and I'm so happy for you. I can't wait to meet you. Your dad will be here tomorrow, and you have so many people praying for your arrival. So that's honestly so wild. I was 37 weeks pregnant. I was here in Texas by myself because my husband drove all of our stuff down from Washington, and I flew. March 12th, we actually had our first church gathering, and Silas was still in my tummy. Yeah, my son's estimated due date was the 17th. And I literally wrote down 11:30. I think my water broke. I had a little bit of leakage around 11, but I assumed I might be having a hard time holding my pee because we were eating dinner with our friend Joe. Joe is one of the funniest people I've ever met in my whole life, and he was making me laugh so hard. And so I remember he left. We were hanging out super late. And I told my husband, I was like, I think I peed my pants. And my husband's like, no, I think maybe your water broke. And I was like, I don't know. So I went to sleep. And then it says 2:15 a.m. So this is technically now the 18th. Just woke up to go pee and my water definitely broke. I called my midwife, Ashley, says, laid down after changing into different shorts and quickly got up thinking how I had pads laying around and started dripping down my leg. So kind of gross. But I I wore a huge pad because I didn't know how much else water, I don't know. I'd never given birth before. I didn't know how much water is in you. And so I put like a puppy pad type thing down underneath me on the bed. I wore a pad, laid back down, so that 2:50 a.m., I felt a pop feeling and started to feel pressure. And I said, you're coming soon, just waiting on contractions when I should be sleeping. But I was too excited. My water broke around like 2 a.m. And then I'm guessing just from my notes, like around 3, I started to get contractions. And I remember they started coming in waves and they were really strong. Before this, so 2 days before, I had been having prodromal labor. So that's just like labor that doesn't really go anywhere. You have like the contractions, but it's not progressing. It didn't feel like those. It felt way more intense. I remember telling my husband, I'm a little bit nervous. Birth can be, or like labor can be a really long time. And so I was trying to mentally prepare myself. Like I could be having contractions like these for 20 plus hours. And so that kind of made me nervous because they were very intense. They felt like very intense period cramps. And then I remember I started to get scared. And then I remember I started to tense up and then they started to get painful. And so I remember in that moment, I was like, I have been praying for a pain-free birth. I refuse. That's literally what I remember thinking in my head. So I said, Alex, I need you to pray for me. And so my husband is the sweetest. He laid hands on me. He prayed. I feel like that helped me get in the zone. And so basically what I did was I remember I kept feeling like I had to pee like nonstop. And so the little pool house we're staying in, it has the smallest bathroom you'll have ever seen in your whole life. And so it's like, this is the toilet, this is the shower. They're literally like this far apart. And so I remember I would sit on the toilet, I would go pee, and then I'd hop back in the shower because the hot water on my back just felt really good. Little did I know, like I forgot about this, but the toilet is literally called the dilation station. So I don't know if that has anything to do with how quick my labor was, but I sat on the toilet a lot because I kept feeling like I had to pee. I remember in the shower just getting so focused because I remembered in one of the books, Supernatural Childbirth by Jackie Mize, that she talked about how her contractions weren't painful. What it felt like was whenever you're working out, how you're contracting a muscle, how you might feel like this tense, tight feeling. And that's basically what it is when you're having a contraction. Your muscles are literally contracting. And I literally was like, I've worked out before. I can do this. And I feel like that just like really shifted my perspective, like keeping my eyes on the Lord, remembering that like I can do this and just breathing through my contractions, keeping my body as relaxed as possible helped me so much. So I'd called my midwives around 2:50. Really soon after I called them and I was like, guys, my contractions are getting so close together. You guys need to come. And so all I remember, honestly, the whole thing is kind of sort of a blur because it was so quick. But the pool house is in my dad's backyard. And so we were actually giving birth. The birth pool was in my dad's back living room. And so we walked across the yard. And I remember feeling this feeling like, honestly, like just feeling like I had to poop and like my body was trying to like push poop out. Like that's the only way I can describe it. Which little did I know that's the fetal ejection process muscle thing. My body was literally pushing Silas. So if you didn't know this, if you were pregnant and you were in a coma and you were about to give birth, your body would literally birth your baby for you. So your body is literally made to give birth. So I just think that's so wild and I think it's so cool. I remember our midwives got there and contractions were a minute apart, lasting a minute long, I'm not going to say it was painful because it wasn't painful, but it was intense. It was like the hardest workout I had ever done in my whole life. I wouldn't say that I was one of those people, like I've seen birth videos where women are just like, like serene. I don't think I was serene, but my husband said I wasn't like loud and I wasn't screaming. I wasn't like, but it was definitely like, had to control my breathing because it's intense. Like if you've ever done an intense workout, like you got to control your breathing. Birth is intense. I feel like that's like the best way to describe it because your body is literally pushing a whole human out of your body, which is honestly so cool and so crazy at the same time. I did only want to labor standing up. I hated laying down. I hated getting on my knees, being bent over. I remember I had Alex. I was like, Alex, they say like it feels good whenever like husbands like squeeze their wife's hips. And he did that one time. I said, do not touch me ever again. I hate that. And so I did not want to be touched. I did have him hold me a few times and just pray for me. And I feel like that was fine. But I did not want him like putting any pressure on my body. I remember when our midwives got there, they were like, start filling up the pool like right now, just because they saw me. Little did I know I'm already in transition. I've been in transition. And my midwife's like, do you want us to check you to see how far along you are? And I was like, sure. I laid down on the couch. I remember it was our main midwife and her midwife assistant. The midwife assistant, she checked me and she said, I can see his head. Do you want to get into the water? And so I'm like, sure. I remember getting into the water. This was so crazy. I literally, because they have to document everything. And so I literally have like medical records of me saying, it doesn't even hurt. It just feels like I have to poop. And I remember being in the water, not feeling any contractions. So I don't know how hard to push. I've never given birth before. I don't know what to expect. I literally felt no contractions in the water. But my son was in the birth canal. He's just waiting to be pushed out. And so I think I pushed for about 30 minutes just simply because I didn't know how hard to push. And I remember I got to the point where like my midwives were like, Brenna, like, do you want to feel down? See if you can feel his head. And so I reached down and I felt the top of my son's head. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to meet my son. I am so excited. And so I started pushing so hard, which I think now knowing, I feel like pushing the second time will be a lot easier because I kind of know what to expect. But I will say crowning, that burns. The ring of fire is like the perfect description of that because that burned. And I literally, they have like my midwives kind of recorded the birth so we could look back on it later. I literally said, oh, that stings. But I was so set on meeting my son that I literally took a breath and then I pushed so hard and pop. His head popped right out, which next time I will try and push a little bit easier with my next son because I did get a slight tear and I do think it was from that. And so my son's head was out and I was like, oh my gosh, we literally have footage where my husband and I are literally laughing because we are so excited that we are about to meet our son. This is so wild. Like it's like birth high. You literally have like so much, like a hormone rush. And his head is out and then I breathe in, take a breath, wait a minute, and then I push. The rest of his body comes out. My husband picks up my son, sets him on my chest, and I am just shook. Like absolutely shook that I just birthed a whole human and this literally happened. So I believe my water broke at 2:50. I'm assuming that contractions started around 3 and then 6:54 my son was born. He was 7 pounds, 7 ounces, 20 inches long, and it was insane. So birth was about 4 hours and they say that your births tend to just get faster and faster. So I joke with my husband and tell him that he just needs to become a midwife because he's just going to have to deliver all of our children. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. It was everything I prayed for. I will say with it being so quickly, I definitely feel like I didn't have time to like process everything in a moment. And so I do feel like I had to like mentally process like what just happened. Because I feel like if you have a longer birth, it's like, I'm about to become a mother. It's about to happen. I've been anticipating this. I've been praying for this. And I feel like for me, it was like boom, boom, boom. He came so fast. But it was amazing. It was wonderful. It was special. And that is literally Silas's birth story. That is how my sweet son was born. I asked on Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, my Instagram is at brennaburkins, literally my name. If you guys had any questions about his birth, one of the questions was, how did you mentally, spiritually, and physically prepare? So for me, the biggest one was prayer. I asked the Lord every single day for a pain-free birth. Prior to my husband and I even getting married, we attended his father's church whenever we lived in Texas. And there was the sweetest woman ever who had told me that she had had pain-free births with all of her kids. I remember this blew my mind. And she said, Jesus died on the cross, which means he's broken every curse. And so that means the pain in childbirth doesn't have to be our portion. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And then I remember my friend Alexis, she had a supernatural childbirth. She actually had a free birth. She is wild. She worked at a birth center for a while, so she felt really confident in doing that. But hers was pain-free. And then one of my friends gifted me the book Supernatural Childbirth, and it was where this woman had pain-free births with, I believe, 5 of her children. And so I was like, well, Lord, if you did it for them, I'm asking you to do that for me. Like, I'm going to be the woman in the Bible, in the parable that talks about coming over and keeps knocking on the door until the guy opens it. It's like, that was me. I was like, Lord, I'm believing that you are going to give me a pain-free birth. So prayer, reading positive birth stories was so important for me. So I read the Ina May's book, Guide to Childbirth. Supernatural Childbirth, obviously, I've referenced it a few times. That book changed my life. And then I feel like something that was really helpful for me was the Built to Birth YouTube channel. I am a learner. I want to understand why things happened and how they happen. And so I feel like understanding what my body was doing in each stage of labor and why it does what it does was so helpful for me. So watching those, pain-free birth, that page on Instagram is so amazing. I love watching birth videos, but they actually have a pain-free birth podcast on Spotify, and I'm pretty sure it's on Apple as well. But listening to positive pain-free birth stories was also a big part. And then watching the business of being born, I feel like just gave me the affirmation of like, I'm doing the right thing in my choice of how I want to birth. And so if you are considering a unmedicated birth, I recommend watching that documentary because I feel like it is awesome. Supplements to prepare. By the way, I'm not a doctor. This is just what worked for me and what I did. I feel like I ate a relatively clean diet, not perfect because while I was pregnant with my son, I did discover I have a special love for Diet Cokes with coconut syrup. So not perfect, but we did eat a lot of red meat whenever we were living in Washington, just as a bioavailable form of vitamin D. We ate pretty high fat. So I guess you could say almost animal-based in a way, but not perfect by any means. I took beef liver as my prenatal. And I feel like that helped a lot with keeping my iron levels high. I remember my midwives, whenever they first took my blood, I had been taking beef liver for a while prior to this, but I just decided to continue to take it as my prenatal. And whenever they took my blood work, they were like, oh my gosh, like your blood work looks incredible. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I started taking magnesium glycinate because I started having intense Charlie horses in the middle of the night, and we're all deficient in magnesium. But I heard that magnesium can help a lot with leg cramps. So I started taking that, which also helped me sleep even better, and I'm already a pretty good sleeper. I took electrolytes every single day to make sure I was hydrated, and then I did eat a lot of dates because I know it's like an old wives' tale that they help like your uterus. Same with red raspberry leaf tea. I drank quite a bit of that. I don't know the effectiveness of it, but I had an incredible birth, so I will be eating dates with butter and lots of red raspberry leaf tea for this one around as well. Someone else asked, what resources would you give someone dealing with fear? So I have a few things that I would recommend. Educate yourself. I feel like we have so much fear around birth just simply because we don't know, because there's so many negative stories that are told. And I feel like all of the movies, whenever a woman's giving birth, she's screaming her head off. She's in so much pain. or water breaks immediately in pain. Like my water broke and I didn't start contractions until like 20, 30 minutes later. And that is very fast. I had an aunt whose water broke and she didn't have contractions or start progressing in labor until 24 hours later. Like everyone's body is different. But I feel like there is so much fear around birth because it's just shown as an emergency. But that's my other thing is you need to trust your body because your body is literally made to do this. Birth isn't an emergency. Now, granted, when I say that, that doesn't mean we ignore the possibility of real emergencies. So I think the big thing is just educating yourself, understanding birth, understanding that it's not an emergency, that your body was literally made to do this. And then also, spiritually speaking, the Lord didn't give you a spirit of fear. And so if God didn't give me fear, then I don't want it. That was like my main thing. And I guess this is just a little bit of my personality, but I am very stubborn. And so I'm like, well, Lord, if you didn't give it to me, I don't want it. And if the enemy is trying to steal from what's supposed to be one of the most special times in my life, then that takes me off. And I'm not playing this game. Pregnancy is a great time to get fear kicked out of your life. Because here's the thing, fear, my friend Alexa said this so good, fear is a nasty weed. And whatever you avoid right now in pregnancy and just let it, just don't even deal with it, like that'll just continue to fester and continue to grow into your motherhood. And so let's kick it out now because you don't want to allow the enemy to rob you from what's supposed to be the most special time in your life. With that, this is also just another side note. I would say if you plan on breastfeeding, definitely research that. I did no research breastfeeding, so I knew nothing. And I feel like honestly that was the toughest part for me was nursing. Just simply because I was like, well, if they're hungry, I just put them on my boob and they're good. But I had no idea about latching, and my son had a tongue and a lip tie, and so it was extremely painful. My son is just like a smaller baby, and my husband and I are just smaller people. And so I remember just like thinking like I'm not doing enough because he's not this super fat, ginormous baby. So obviously he's starving, which he wasn't. And so I feel like research all of it. I feel like we put so much research in like a baby carrier or a crib and all these things, but I don't feel like we talk enough about how important it is to research like going into labor, birth, what supplements you give your children after birth, wellness visits, breastfeeding, like all of it. Like I feel like that is almost more important than the other things. So I would definitely say research as much as possible. Someone said, did your water break? How long was labor from the first contraction? My water did break, and it was about 4 hours long. It was so fast. Someone else said, how did you overcome the thought of, I've never done this before, so how am I going to do this? This is an honest answer. Okay, I guess I kind of have to give like the memory backstory, but I remember growing up, we have a Six Flags here in Texas, and I remember my dad took me, and we were going to go on the Shockwave. That was supposed to be my first roller coaster. It's a roller coaster that has 2 loops, and I remember I was like maybe 9, and my dad was like, do you want to do it? And I was like, sure. And I remember I was so excited. He's hyping me up. It's so fun. It's so fast. It's not a long roller coaster. There was like no line. And I'm like 9 years old, and I get up there and I'm terrified. And I'm like, I don't want to do it. And literally this girl who's in the row in front of us, because there's no line, she's just riding it over and over again. I think this girl's like 7. Like she's clearly younger than me. And I remember in that moment being so frustrated, like, she's not afraid, but I am. And she's experiencing so much, like having so much fun on this roller coaster. I remember that like altered like my brain. Cause I feel like from that moment, I was like, if so-and-so can do it, then I can do it. Like if that 7-year-old girl can ride a roller coaster, then I can ride a roller coaster. Granted, I didn't that day, but I did in the future. So for me, I feel like it was like if so-and-so can have an unmedicated birth, even if they didn't have a pain-free birth, if they could do it and they could get through it, then I can do it. And if I plan on having children, like having multiple children, then I'm just going to have to do it. I'm just going to have to experience it. And there is that like almost, I don't want to say fear, but it's like I don't know what to expect. And I feel like after you have your first baby, I feel like it's so much more freeing to the rest of the birth experiences because you kind of have an idea of what can happen. But that was for me was, well, if so-and-so can do it, then I can do it. someone said, how did you guys know you loved the name Silas? So Silas is my son's name. My husband and I actually had a girl's name picked out that we've had picked out since like right when we got married. And we had gotten a prophetic word about having a daughter. And so whenever I got pregnant, I was like, oh my gosh, it's her. And so my husband and I could not agree. We could not agree on a boy's name. And so whenever we found out that my son was a boy, we were like, ah, darn it. And so we just went through a lot of lists. Silas is a biblical name, so it's really special. But that's not why we picked it. It's not that we're pastors. So we're like, our children need to have biblical names. But we just loved it. I was just going through a list of names, and that one really stuck out to me. And my husband liked it. So it was the first name that we both liked. So that's how we ended up with that one. And what's also super cool is that Silas in the Hebrew actually means prayed for. And my husband and I have been trying to get pregnant for almost a year and a half, and it just wasn't happening. And so we had been praying to have a baby, and we were like, that name's perfect because he is who we've been praying for. And so super special. Someone said, what scripture, stories, affirmations helped your mental state the most? I think the biggest one is just hearing the stories of my friends that had such special births. Having my husband there praying in the Spirit and praying over me and encouraging me the whole time was probably one of the biggest helps for myself, because I feel like it just helped me stay focused. And then I actually had a birth playlist that I'll link down below on my Spotify. I have one for my son Silas, and I'm actually creating one for my second birth, my second son. I have that one on there as well. But the song Sound Mine by the Torwalds, that one I feel like was so special because one of my main verses was, the Lord did not give us a spirit of fear, but one of power, love, and a sound mind. And so I feel like that just kept me focused. I was like, Lord, you did not give me fear. And from all of the things that I had read was like, whenever you're afraid, you tend to tense up your body. And when you tense up your body rather than relaxing, that's when you feel the most pain in birth. And so I was like, Lord, you did not give me fear, and I'm not going to feel any pain. And so I feel like having that song playing was really helpful for me. But yeah, I had a pain-free birth. It was supernatural. It was amazing. Me sharing all of this, I'm not saying that if you give birth in a hospital or a birth center, you're wrong or you're right. However you bring your baby into the world is so special, painful, pain-free. My biggest thing I wanted to tell you was just share what the Lord can do and testify of his goodness and what's possible. And so I hope it was encouraging to you. If you have any more questions, let me know down below in the comments. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on my other videos, and I'll see you next time.